Right, morning gentlemen. So we've got Tyler Rakich with us this morning, an old boy. What year were you here, Tyler, remind me?
Finished in 2008.
Oh yeah, so we did we crossed briefly. Touch base with Tyler last year. So Tyler is going to talk through his business, but also a bit of supply chain management and logistics. And I know some of you obviously are starting on a fairly small scale at the moment, but it will ramp up. So it's good to have that information at your fingertips. Even for those of you offering services, apps, etc., who may not be interested in this at this stage or need it at this stage, you never know where you might end up in the future. Okay, so I will leave it to Tyler, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thanks, man. Hey, man. So I guess I was kind of like, when Kieran asked me to come and do supply chain and distribution, I was kind of thinking about from you guys' perspective, and it's probably something at school that I wouldn't have paid too much attention to, because often you look at like whatever your product is or your service or whatever you're trying to bring to market, and you often don't, at your age, probably pay too much attention to how you get it there or the logistics of making it happen. But as you scale, it's a really important thing, which if it's done poorly can really hinder your growth, and if it's done really well can also make you grow really quickly. So yeah, hopefully it's not too boring for you guys, but yeah, I'll take you through it anyway. So my business is Dynasty Sport. We make sports apparel, so playing kit, training kit, you name it in the apparel space, we sort of make it. And we supply some of the biggest teams in Australasia. So we've got 4 NRL teams, a couple of Super Rugby teams, Bunnings Cup, Auckland City Football, we do all the New Zealand domestic cricket teams, the Army, Navy and Air Force, we do bits and pieces of their sports in day-to-day uniform, and a bunch of other sort of properties around the sporting realm in Australasia. From that, obviously those are the big guys, but from that below we do both clubs and schools. So our sort of model is that whilst we supply these guys, we also put time and effort into supplying schools like Westlake. We don't do Westlake currently, but that's a bit of a work on. So our sort of theory is that if you take a director of sports, like a lot of suppliers do one sport really well, whether that's rugby or whether that's football or maybe basketball, but we sort of have a professional team in every one of the key sports that most schools would do. So that means that if you're a director of sport, you know, and your passion's cricket, we've got all the New Zealand domestic cricket teams, and as a result, you know, our kit is generally perceived as pretty good in that space, or very good in that space, and that gets us into the school below. I guess how we got here, like you guys, obviously you can see it's quite an old photo, but Westlake boy, and you know, these are all my best mates down at the pavilion. From there, it was actually quite an interesting story how we kind of got into this business. So in our last year, was one of my best mates was the head boy, and he organised the leaders' jerseys, and no one really liked what he designed. It was kind of like red heavy, and yeah, we didn't like it. So me and another mate used sort of a couple of contacts that we had and went and made our own rogue leaders' jerseys for the boys. And yeah, that was sort of a real good insight into just, you know, bringing a product to market or doing something different. And we obviously got into a bit of trouble for it because it wasn't the school supplier and the school wasn't too happy about it, but the boys loved us for it, so it was great. From there, so myself and another lad from school, Jamal, who's one of my business partners, we sort of started importing sports training equipment. And I guess back in my day we didn't have anything like this, so you kind of had to take your lead if you wanted to do something like this. I always knew I wanted to do something in business, but didn't quite know what that was. I was passionate about sport, never good enough to play at a professional level. But you know, it was a space that I really wanted to sort of be in. So we started importing sports training product and equipment, and did that for a couple of years, which was, you know, an interesting learning curve, and sort of got us into the market. Then from there, we picked up the distribution rights for a brand called BLK in New Zealand. So we did like the Kiwis, New Zealand Rugby League, and a whole raft of different sports. And we had that in New Zealand for 5 years. And then I guess at the end of our licensing agreement, we launched our own brand, Dynasty, in 2018. One of the kind of big lessons that I had through all of this was what we do is there's an element of sponsorship. So all of the contracts which we signed were in our parent company's name rather than in the brand's name. So that just gave us the flexibility of being able to go, hey, look, we've had a good relationship with you for 3 to 5 years or whatever the time period was, we're launching our own brand. The quality of the product's going to be the same. The suppliers are going to be the same because we have relationships with our manufacturers. You're welcome to go with BLK if you want, but here's the opportunity with us. And lucky for us, all the professional teams that we're working with stuck by us due to the relationship which we had, which was really cool. So I'll play this for you guys. Just hopefully we'll give you a bit of.
Can you help
With what?
now you've got two separate screens. I don't know how to use it. What do I do with colour codes? What do I do with the Oh, I was going to have to stay for another year because I still can't work it.
So I just thought this would be interesting for you guys to see. This is our main factory that we use in China, in Guangzhou. And it probably gives you a little bit of an understanding of the scale. And I guess, like, I'm lucky enough, I've been up to China, 10 to 15 times, visited a whole bunch of different factories. But one of the kind of, it might be different because of the internet and you guys get to see more and more of this stuff, but my perception before I went to China was really that, I was going to be going into sweatshops and, that there was not that much ethics in the way that they manufactured or supplied and that sort of stuff. And don't get me wrong, that definitely happens in certain places, but from my experience in the factories that I've been into, it's hasn't been the case for me. I've definitely been to some which, it's been questionable. We don't use those guys, but I just thought I'd show you guys this because it gives you an understanding of the scale and what a Chinese factory from the inside looks like.
Do they need volume?
It's a terrible soundtrack, but it helps. stop there, because kind of gives you guys an understanding of the scale, and
So you may cover this. I've got a couple of questions.
Yeah.
I've dealt with China in the past. I was with New Zealand's largest retailer.
Yeah.
How does a small business, how do they start? You may cover this. And we're going to be doing, actually the standard that we're doing is our NCA standard. We're about to look at location. We're about to look at risks of global expansion. We're about to look at supply chain issues. We're currently doing cultural intelligence. So how does all of that, how does a small business know where to start so that they don't end up in a sweatshop, or maybe they have enlisted some help from New Zealand Trade and Enterprise? Every large business has started as a small business. How do you even know where? Yeah, I don't know if you're going to cover something like that, but where do you?
Yeah, look, it's really difficult. There's a lot of supply chain or product sourcing websites on the internet which can link you in with suppliers. Googling to look at reviews or what other people's experience are. But if you're really serious about it, it's worth. Obviously you can't right now because of the pandemic, but going there and meeting those suppliers face to face if you can. I know that's hard when you're starting out small. Look, you've just got to look for red flags in terms of supply chain. Often you can factories will show you samples, and if you don't probe, you can see other brands that they make for or other people that they make for, and that's usually a really good indication of quality. And often you kind of wing it in the sense that if you look up those brands, you assume that they've done their due diligence on the supply chain because they're much larger. And it's, I wouldn't write that in an NCA, assessment, but that's just the nature of it. You kind of got to just give it a crack and just think of what, if I was using a good supplier, what things would they be doing? What checks and balances do they have to make sure that quality's fine? Sometimes a real telltale sign is packaging. If the packaging's really poor, often it means that they're probably a small run factory. But another thing which you've got to be probably careful of, and it's not always easy to figure out, is that on Alibaba, which is probably where a lot of people start when they look for products overseas, there's a lot of agents which aren't actually the manufacturer. So you might be talking to an agent who's not actually the supply chain, and what happens then is that you're trying to develop something or make some changes. You're not talking to the person who makes those changes, so it gets lost in interpretation. And there's not an easy way to figure out whether they're an agent or not. Often it can be, can you show me a video of your factory, or show me the product on the factory floor? And if they can show you that quickly, it generally means that they're going to be the manufacturer. But if they avoid that, that means that they're probably not. To answer your question, it's difficult starting out, but the best way is to go and eyeball these people and meet face to face. It's actually really interesting. We changed hat supplier just as the pandemic hit, and we spend a huge amount to do melted caps with them every year. But I haven't met that supplier face to face, and we pay our bills on time. We do everything. We've got a really good working relationship with them, but I still can't get favours out of them. Whereas, take our bag factory as an example. I've met them multiple times. They've taken me out for dinner. Those guys almost do anything for me. So that face-to-face interaction of, hey, I've spent the time to come and meet you. Just giving them some time means a lot in a supply chain sense.
Do you think it's worth them? I know, remember Deb Sony, who did the panel at the beginning of the year, who had the suit business? So he went quite early on and visited suppliers in India. And I know, Jackson and Will, we've been talking about you guys getting into the US to look at suppliers. Obviously the capital outlay can be really tough. Do you think it is something that they should prioritise?
Yeah, if you can, whether you're looking to take a trip or put money into the product, it's probably, if you've got a limited budget, it's probably better to put your money into product. But if you can find a way to get over there, it's definitely worth it. To meet them, to see. I think like for me, I learned a lot about products from being on the factory floor and seeing them being made. You know, there's a lot of things that you think might happen in the process, and you know, for us in our day-to-day business, you know, we're always working with our main supplier, that one that I showed you guys the video of, and how we can improve things. And you know, everything for us, well, not everything, but most stuff's made to order, so we're like tackling a bit of a lead time. So, you know, there's a couple of efficiencies which we work with them, which bring down that manufacture time. And it's just things like that that you don't, externally you can't sort of figure that stuff out, but being there you can really look at it and make changes and implement some good practices. So obviously through, for us getting started, like BLK was great for us. We made some really good connections and relationships with manufacturers who you know, had been manufacturing for some big global players for a number of years. And for us, it was kind of like a little bit of a cheap way to get in as such, because you know, if we were to go and find these manufacturers, that would have taken a lot of trial and error and work. And not to say that we just found the best one, we worked through a couple to get to the best one, but you know, that was kind of our way in. One of the things with you know, your suppliers, you kind of got to think of them as your business partners. You know, they can be your best asset or you know, the worst liability that you'll have. And I think something which has sort of held us in really good stead is just being honest with our suppliers. Like, they're real people too. And if you're, you know, it's probably when you guys starting out, it's a little bit different because they're going to want everything up front because you've got no supply history. But for us, it's being honest, you know, around, you know, if our cash flow is running short a couple of weeks, and you know, we are going to be late on paying an invoice for, you know, goods which are about to leave, just say to them, hey guys, like here's our situation. You know, can we ship these, and you know, we'll pay you in 2 weeks' time. We won't have the goods, and as long as you do what you say you're going to do, they're really happy to work with you. And you know, the thing I've sort of learned is at the start, you wouldn't be like willing to have those conversations, and that 2 weeks that it sits there before you get the money, that ultimately costs you money at the other end, because you know, you've got goods sitting finished that you can't sell because they're not where you need them to be. So a couple of lessons that I think I've just touched on a little bit, but is, you know, extended payment terms when you need it, but also, you know, express productions on orders that you need some help with. So, you know, you guys are going to make mistakes. We make mistakes, you know, every month. But having a supplier where you go, hey, look, you know, I've got the Cowboys running out in a special jersey, and you know, the colour in the front logo was wrong. I really, you know, it's going to be detrimental to my business if we don't make these in 2 weeks. You know, just having that relationship means that they'll go and do that for us, because they understand, obviously, for them to succeed, they need us to succeed. So one of the big projects that we've sort of undertaken for the last it's sort of taken three or 4 years of development. And I think Nike and Adidas have been doing it for a while, but at our end of the market, in that team sport space, there's not many others, particularly in Australasia, that have developed that. So we worked really hard to launch our Ecotech range of fabrics, which is all made from recycled plastic bottles. So, you know, that was a real good insight for me into supply chain and working with your partners, because, you know, we had a bunch of false starts, and making sure that you're doing the proper tests before you implement a product, because the last thing you want to do is go and commit to a whole bunch of fabric and then find that, you know, I don't know, it pills after 2 washes or something. So for us, it was a really good insight and a really cool project, which we're really sort of proud of. So I guess is that, you know, in each one of these jerseys, playing and off-field, there's 38 plastic bottles, which comprises that fabric. And as a business, we're on track to take or repurpose 12 million plastic bottles by the way of producing our apparel, both in New Zealand and Australia, which has been a really cool project, and something without those great relationships with our supply chain partners, we probably wouldn't have been able to do. So yeah, it's something which I'm really proud of. one of the things which COVID's really sort of brought up is obviously with lockdowns and whatnot, like you can't foresee that, but having different supply chain options, whether that's in the same country or in different regions.
Would that be called a contingency plan?
Yeah, what? Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
We're just sorry, we've got an assessment due tomorrow, and there's contingencies, not logistics, but marketing. And I'm just trying to get through what a contingency plan is. So supply chain, you just got a really great example. You could slip something like that into your marketing because it will affect your marketing aims, but
Those contingency plans are something like in business you tend to not think about because you're so focused on what you're doing, day to day, or to get your product to where it needs to be, or to develop something. But it's worthwhile not putting some time into just thinking about that in every aspect that you do. What if my server goes down, as an example? What am I going to do? How am I going to operate if that happens? And just having, I think, probably one of the lessons that I've got from us getting to where we are now was that when you're small, you're just reactive. You just, man, I wish I had thought about that. And often when you're under pressure, you make decisions which you sometimes later regret because you haven't put the proper time and effort into thinking about it. So yeah, again, from a supply chain perspective, having those alternate supply chain options, and if they're in different countries and regions, that's even better from a pandemic perspective because certain countries were in lockdown for extended periods of time, others weren't. So for us, manufacturing, one of the big places which apparel's made is Fiji. So that's somewhere which we've had small things manufactured when we were really lucky. Our main supply chain partner didn't get affected by the pandemic. They operated apart from 7 days through the whole time. But we did have alternate relationships that we could turn to if we needed them. So that was good.
I've got a question. Sorry, I'm not asking all the questions. Butting in here. So how do you we teach that about having, just go to an alternative supplier. How does that actually work? Because obviously your alternative supplier cannot be just waiting for something to happen to your supply chain for them to be the plan B or the backup.
Yeah.
So, and they're not keeping spare capacity just in case something happens to you.
Correct.
So how does that relationship even start? You go to someone and say, hey, can you be my backup? We may never need you.
Yeah, and what a lot of businesses do, particularly in our space, is they'll use a bunch of suppliers just for that risk. So they'll have their product set up at 2 different places, try and get a 50-50 flow of products, or have them specialise in certain types. So, there's like knitted and wovens and what we do, 2 different constructions of fabrics. One might do your knitters, one might do your wovens, but the issue with that is that then if your woven factory gets shut down and they specialise in knitted, it's really hard to transition that. So, look, that's how we used to operate with BLK. We had 2 or 3 factories that we'd work with and just, choose them for supply based on, I guess the sales rep, what they wanted to get out of the product. A lot of the stuff was turnaround. One of our factories had slightly better quality, but took longer to manufacture. So there was all those factors which we used to decide where we wanted to sort of supply. All right, so now on the distribution side. So have any of you guys heard of 3PL? What is it?
It's like where it's held, like distribution's held at a different off-site place and managed by bought in inventory and sent out by someone else.
Yeah, awesome. So for you other guys that don't know, it's probably something with scaling, definitely starting out, is something really worth looking at. So obviously, you take care of the manufacture or the product. They deal with packaging that, storing that, warehousing that, and then distributing that to your networks. And obviously, you tell them where it needs to go or who the customer is, but they handle that really big part of getting it there. And probably one of the things which I definitely recommend for you guys at your age, like there's plenty of businesses out there that, particularly leading up to Christmas when you guys are on school holiday, are looking for extra warehouse staff. Like if you can get a week in there, you'll learn a whole lot about distribution and stuff that you wouldn't have thought about. I was really lucky. I worked every school holidays in a distribution business, so for me that was second nature from a young age, seeing what was done really well and what wasn't done, so well. And just having that understanding of how it works is really sort of valuable. I think there's actually another Westlake old boy who he started AS Colour, which you guys all know. And I went out there the other week just to have a look through their warehouse, and they've got like robotic picking. It's just blows your mind when you go up there. But talking to him, they had a whole lot of challenges for a number of years on how their business operated from a distribution perspective, and that's finally led them to where they are now, where it's seamless and works really well.
Jackson, did you and Will visit AS Colour?
No. We were planning to, but we never did.
Okay, I think
If you got the opportunity to, definitely, I've seen plenty of these sorts of things. That's the best I've seen. It's phenomenal.
And I'd imagine AS Colour would be quite happy to have anyone, you don't have to be in clothing. It's just sort of have an idea. Right. Yep, cool.
So one of the key benefits of 3PL, or some of the benefits of 3PL is, I guess, it allows businesses to scale. And you're always trying to grow and do more. And if you think of like a warehouse, like take this room as an example. If you were storing product in here, you're only able to fit as much as fits in this room. Whereas these 3PL warehouses, they've got, it's not infinite space, but they've got, more space than you're going to need. And they charge per pallet. So you can scale up or scale down as you need. And it's charged on a week by week basis. So it's really good for growing up. Or, if you're doing like a seasonal product, as an example, like, I don't know, if you were doing like Christmas decorations as an example, that towards the back end of the year, you're going to need a heap of stock. And then in January, hopefully you've got nothing left and you don't need any storage space. So it's really valuable for, for scaling your business. And that, I guess, that allows you as a business owner or someone to really focus on what you're doing, which is your product, getting your marketing right and getting it out to your customers rather than focusing on distribution, which, as I touched on earlier, if it's done well is really good, but if it's done really poorly, can be really costly to your business. You guys live in the internet age, like when you order something online from anywhere, you generally expect it within a couple of days. Some distribution businesses which have run really poorly, which I'm sure some of you shop with, it can take 10 days or 2 or 3 weeks. It's not a great experience, and often if you could buy that product elsewhere, you'd go and do that rather than supporting that business. Whereas if it comes in 1 to 2 days, probably have a pretty good experience with it, and you'd probably be likely to go and shop with them again. So 3PL managers are often they're very experienced and knowledgeable in distribution, so it can also be a good place for you to learn. And if you're thinking of setting up a warehouse yourself, they've got probably some good tips and tricks. Equally, going and working in a warehouse in the holidays is another good way to get that experience. Minimises the warehouse and staffing costs. Starting out, you guys will want to keep your overheads as low as possible. So having 1 or 2 people in the warehouse can be relatively costly, and if they're part-timers as well, then it's you're sort of at their mercy. If they've got a sports game on or something, and you need orders packed, you probably can't guarantee that they're going to be there. As I touched on before, it allows rapid growth without having to have physical infrastructure. So you don't have to go and get a bigger building, move to that building, which can, we've done it a couple of times. Takes ages, and it's a huge effort to get it done. Uses buyer power for things like freight and packaging. So I think if you guys go to Career Post or Aramex or any of those companies, being small, they'll probably charge you a pretty high rate. Whereas if you go to a 3PL supplier, they're often sending and receiving packages from a number of different places. So you'll have good volume, you'll get a better price as a result. And one of the key benefits of 3PL is that you can expand into overseas markets without a physical premise. So a lot of brands probably a lot of the products that you guys buy or your parents buy at home, they they are all stored at a 3PL. So brands like Dyson, like Nike and Adidas, they use 3PL in New Zealand because it's not one of their key markets, but they've got, they've obviously got a big footprint here and they want to supply product here, so they use a 3PL in New Zealand to bring that product to market. We don't use a 3PL. We did use a 3PL for a couple of months, and one of the sort of negatives that we found was that the order dispatch times for us were too slow. So not every 3PL provider is going to be like that, but we use two, and we just, our business KPI, we run 10 to 12 online stores for our own brand and then teams. So like we run the online store for the Crusaders, the Hurricanes and the Highlanders. And our KPI is to dispatch within 24 hours. Often the 3PLs were taking sort of 3 to 5 days, and it just, for us, wasn't probably the service level that we wanted to offer, particularly being new on the market. The stock management wasn't great at a 3PL. You guarantee the stock, so, like I guess if a box goes missing, that's your liability, even though you've got no control over, who's in there or how they operate their business. One of the things which I worked on, so just to take a step back, so we've got a warehouse up in Albany, and our Australian business is actually much larger than our New Zealand business. So we operate and distribute all of those Aussie online stores, which there's 5 of them, from our Albany warehouse. And by doing that, I had a contact through my network that was at DHL, and we were able to negotiate like a really, really aggressive bag rate, which was almost just slightly more expensive than if we were to distribute in Australia, and their services overnight to all the metro centres and a couple of days if you're external. So, that's allowed us to basically have our warehouse here where we've got 4 full-time staff in there, and not have that cost of setting up over in Australia to distribute locally there. 2023, we've pulled on a couple more teams in the professional space, and one of the things that we have by not having a warehouse in Australia is that, so you take like retailers like Rebel Sport and whatnot, so they will commit to a certain amount of stock, like an Indian order, and they'll want fulfillment stock throughout the year. So we have a hefty duty bill because that's bought into New Zealand and then exported to Australia. So we're at the point now where it makes sense for us in 2023 to look at opening a warehouse in Australia, which is something which we're working on at the moment. So one of the things which we do really well, which some of our competitors probably don't do, and it just gives you a level of professionalism. So all of our cartons are custom made and have our branding on the side. Again, that's just the first thing that your customers see when your product turns up is, it's branded with your logo. We've got our own security tape. It just, in my opinion, looks really professional when it turns up to the customer. We're the same with courier bags. So our courier bags are branded up with our Ecotech messaging, which is the garments made from recycled plastic bottles. And again, that's the first thing a customer sees when they open up a package. I'm sure you guys have shopped online before and seen, brands that do that really well. And then there's some others where it just turns up in, like a blank box, and, it's, that experience is probably not as good as if it was branded. One of the things which we do in both New Zealand and Australia is when our factory puts a local courier ticket on our boxes, so that just saves double handling. So once that comes in, our freight forwarder then tips that into the courier network. So in Australia, that means that we don't have to bring it to a physical warehouse to send out to customers. Not like, starting out, your suppliers probably won't be willing to do that for you. But as you scale up, that's something which you can do just to minimise costs and be a little bit innovative. If you're going to a market where you don't necessarily want to have a physical presence. I'll touch on questions later, but I sort of was talking to something the other day just around this and kind of what I would have potentially wanted to hear or some lessons. So I just sort of had 5 things I wish I'd paid closer attention to at Westlake, you know, sitting in you guys' shoes. So build your network throughout. Try as many sports subjects and industries as you can. I guess now's like you guys' time to fail. You know, no one wants to go up to fail, but if you try as many different things as you like, you'll figure out what you're really passionate about, what you're not. And I think, you know, everyone would tell you that in business, if your goal is to go out and get rich, you know, you're probably not going to succeed. Like, I'm really passionate about sports and sports apparel and our product. Like, you know, so for me, going to work every day is not like, sure, there's some things that I don't like to do, but genuinely, like, every morning I wake up and I'm excited to be there. You know, I'm really proud of what we're doing, what we're trying to achieve, and I think, you know, at you guys' age, it's cool to try different things, and you know, whether that's subjects or industries or sports or whatever, give it a go, because you know, you've got no risk. I guess when you get to my age, you know, you've got a mortgage, you've got kids. You know, my ability to risk, to take risk is much lower than what it was when I was your age. So you know, I just encourage you guys to give everything you can a go. So build your network throughout the school. So you guys are so fortunate to go to such a great school like this, like I did. You know, you've got 2,500 boys, and you've got a network of people that in 5 to 10 years' time are going to be all in different industries and different places. For me, that's been so valuable. You know, like particularly being in the school uniform, in the school space. You know, there's a whole bunch of my old teachers that are now like deputy headmasters or whatever at other schools. Like, I go in there and you've got that relationship, you've got history, whereas if you go in and you don't know anyone, it just makes that much harder. You know, equally at some of the professional sporting teams that we've sort of signed, there's been people that have gone to school here that I've known for a number of years, and you know, they're in a commercial role there. Again, it just, you know, you get that rub of the green in terms of information, or you know, they'll see you favourably.
Be nice to everybody too. Don't step over the little guy or the, you know, I don't know, the one you thought was a bit geeky at school, because guess what? You're going to need them one day.
100%. They often turn up in places, and you know, having that good relationship means that you'll get a better opportunity than you otherwise would have. This is probably a big one, which I took some time to learn. You know, where you guys are at right now is you know, I guess you're running off the school bell, but particularly as you guys finish school, it's the practice time management and scheduling when you're young. You know, the thing at the moment is that you guys have only got really yourselves to worry about in terms of your time and what you've got on. But I guess as you grow, you'll have staff and other people, so you'll have to keep track of your schedule, but also theirs, and also make sure that they're, you know, busy and doing what they need to be doing. So you know, it's a good place to start now. I mean, yeah, it's something which is a little bit boring, but it'll do you really well moving forward in business.
I'm partway through a session on time management, which next year I'll deliver a little bit earlier, but it did become clear that they could perhaps cut. Yeah, it will be boring.
So learn your strengths and be honest and vulnerable about your weaknesses. You know, there's going to be things that you're going to be really, really good at, and it's always, you know, great to like get better at the things you're good at, but to be honest and recognise your weaknesses and work on those, and also not be afraid to ask for help. Like, you know, there's certain things in my business that I know areas that I'm not good at, and lucky for me, when you get bigger, you can employ experts in those areas who you then, you know, they'll present to you on whether it's freight logistics, whatever it may be. So, you know, I guess be aware of what you're good at and what you're not. Like, another example of that is, like, I hated accounting, which is quite funny. I really didn't like accounting at school. I think I probably had a boring teacher, so it may have played into it. But, you know, like, so I gave up accounting after, I think it was even fourth form then. Loved economics because it's kind of like a bit more product there, and but just didn't like accounting, and that's something which I've now had to really learn hard. You know, is how to read a balance sheet and what, you know, cash flow statements mean and that sort of stuff. Where, you know, it's easy to give up on that sort of stuff, but in the future, that'll do you really well. I think anything in what you guys are doing with your own business, being strong in accounting, definitely, will pay dividends. So, even though you may not enjoy it, stick with it, because it'll do you well.
Hands up in here, who was just like Tyler at school and didn't like accounting? Come on.
Yeah, it's boring, guys.
We
But
did 2 sessions on 0. That was like dragging, people through mud.
Yeah, it's again, it's another one of those things that you probably don't think about, but it's so important. Like understanding money, how you can make it work for you when you scale up is hugely important. So, even though we don't enjoy it, stick with it because it is really important. The final one is for you guys to enjoy every second of it. I'm lucky enough, I've got sort of 20 of my best mates. Sure, there's other guys that are coming, but they're all still from school. You guys are fortunate that every day you get to hang out with, probably one of some of your really good mates, and we'll probably be your mates for life. So yeah, enjoy where you guys are, and be excited about the future, but do take the time to enjoy now, because you guys are, it's pretty good, particularly being in a school like this. And questions. I actually, I know that no one likes to ask questions, so I thought I've got a $150 online voucher for the best question. So get asking.
I asked some pretty good ones.
Yeah, you don't
Cameron.
know.
Here we go. That's right.
No. This is a generic one. But if you were starting again in the business that you're in now,
Yeah.
what would you do radically differently?
Good question. I would probably have paid a little bit more attention to just some of the agreements that we got into. I think when you're young and you're starting out, you're often, you're just so ambitious and eager to, like in our space, I guess the teams that we partner with, they're brand marketing for us. And being young, you want to get your brand out there as much as you can, but we entered some agreements which weren't the best, and probably for me that was a lack of understanding of what we're actually getting ourselves into. So just taking that time and I was really lucky. Through business I had some relatively good mentors, but if you don't take the time to discuss those big decisions with experienced people, because you think you might know it all, and hopefully you do, but it's always good to get a different perspective. So yeah.
What do you do to initially get people to be using your product?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So we were lucky. We inherited BLK, which was already a brand to start with. But then when we launched our own brand, like going to Australia, we were known to no one there. So for us, ours is a lot of B2B sales. We're not targeting the end consumer with our product as such. So for us, it was like a lot of cold calling, just getting in front of people, and just being passionate about your product, having a really clear example of or really clear message of what your competitive advantage is and what you can do for that customer. But yeah, I mean, in terms of starting from scratch, it's just really for us it was hustling and just getting to as many places as we could and in front of many people as we possibly could.
When you first started getting stuff from China,
Yep.
Obviously now they're a lot bigger, but how did you negotiate cheaper shipping? Did you go through an agent or?
Yeah. So we used Mondial is a big company which does all of our freight forwarding. So often there are shipping agents in China which you can use, but partnering up with a freight forwarder here is definitely worthwhile. One of the things which we export a lot of products via DHL, but the import rates in New Zealand are really poor. So whenever we have to bring something in, the supplier rate is half the price of what our rate is in New Zealand. So it's just probably weighing up your options and seeing where you can get alternate, pricing options and measures from. So yeah, it's not, when you're small, it's tough because your options are usually limited,
Yeah.
but as you grow, you'll get more and more.
How do you break into the like NRL space, and also like do you have plans on extending into other teams like other sports?
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of the NRL, we were just sort of had a couple of key contacts that that were in the commercial space there, and so the first thing that we partnered with was the Titans, who's they're the wooden spooners probably this year, but it was a good footprint in for us. So we did them for a year. Other teams saw what we were able to do, and really resonated with that, and that gave us the opportunity into others. So whilst you always want to go for the Storm or the Penrith or all the good teams. Often, it's unrealistic to try and to start there because they're just not going to take a new brand often. But if you start with the lower ones and do a really good job of that, then that ends up being your marketing pitch to do more as such to the market. In terms of expansion overseas, yeah, definitely. So one of the things which we've been really lucky with, and I'm grateful for, is with BLK, we probably saw exactly what not to do with distributors. So I guess your distributors are often, they're your business partner, and at the end of the day, that's a brand which I created, which I'm really passionate about. And if someone in the UK, for whatever reason, does a terrible job of that or lets someone down, that reflects poorly on me, even though I've had nothing to do with the day-to-day running of that. So, we've definitely looked at that, but with the pandemic, not being able to go and sit in front of people and really get to know them and meet them, that's meant that we've just put that on hold for a little bit. So yeah, I'm actually going up to the UK for that in November to look at a couple of opportunities up there. But it's obviously the first time we've been able to do that in the last 2 or 3 years, just with the lack of travel.
What sports in the UK?
Oh, so it'll be similar sports, so rugby, cricket, football potentially as well. Probably not the EPL, but we'll try and work our way somewhere towards it.
Oh, coming thick and fast. Toby, and then Martin.
As you're like an established business now, and it's not like probably, well, I'm not sure, you might have the same growth as when you started. How do you keep, or what do you kind of aim to achieve in terms of growth rate and keep pushing your business forward?
Yeah, so for us, measuring, a lot of people talk to you about what market share do you have, and that's a really hard thing for us to measure because our market's so, we do sports apparel, but we do a whole lot of corporate uniforms. That market's huge, so for us to put a size in our market share is really hard, but for us it's we expand by location, so we've got reps all up and down the country, in New Zealand pretty well covered, but in Australia we've sort of centred Sydney and Brisbane currently, and up in Townsville because we've got the Cowboys, but for us it's a huge opportunity in Perth, Adelaide and Melbourne, so that's the next area of growth that we'll look at. But one of the things for us which is really sort of leaped our growth forward is just innovating, and the fabric made from recycled plastic bottles, none of our competitors in that space are doing that, and that's a way, again, I always think about what a customer would want, my sort of thinking is always, why would you not go with us if we're doing all of this stuff? And by having that attitude, that often means that you've got a proposition which is better than your competitors, and that makes that growth and expansion happen naturally. But in terms of growth rate, we don't, turnover is obviously an easy one, a little bit hard for us because our team performance is seasonal, so you take the Titans as an example, the wooden spooners this year, their product's not selling very well. But last year they were great, they made the semi-finals, so we sold a heap of products. So there's a few factors that we can't control, but the ones that we can, at grassroots and at school level, we measure that every year and don't necessarily set a growth rate as such, but we've got targets on where we want to be in certain regions.
South Ontario, seems nice.
When going, how much did it cost to do the R&D into developing the material or the product that is recycled from plastic bottles?
Yeah, so we're probably really fortunate in the sense that we'd have 5 years of history with that supplier. So, they we got it really cheap because we'd spent a considerable amount with them before. But starting out, that's something which is really tough. And definitely, like I've been to some of the trade shows. I definitely recommend if you guys have the opportunity to go up to. I'm not sure post-pandemic where those are going to be necessarily, but we stumbled across a bunch of really cool technology just from being at trade shows. We didn't necessarily use those suppliers, but you kind of get an idea for what they're going to do. And I think if your brief on what you want is really well structured and set out, the suppliers are amazing in terms of what they can develop and what they can implement. But starting out, to answer your question, from a cost perspective, it'd be challenging just because you don't have that past history, of supply. So I definitely recommend if you're getting into clothing as an example, you'd start with stock fabrics or fabrics which are already created, and then once you've got runs on the board, look at how you can innovate and how you can do something different.
So it was your suppliers who did the R&D or like.
Yeah. So we would run. Well, they would do the testing in house for us, but we would sort of give them the recipe of what we wanted to make it. Then they would go and manufacture it because they've got some amazing labs and facilities which complement, put the fabric together, and they've got some pretty good sort of testing stuff. So they handled that for us, but we all obviously ultimately made the final call of whether it was going to work or not. And that's probably a good point. Like we went through 4 or 5 different mills, which are fabric suppliers, to get the product right. We were so close 3 or 4 times to launching product, but some of the testing, which I think we tested 10 factors in our fabrics, some of them just weren't right. It's pretty disheartening because it takes a long time, but I think for us now it's really paid off. We're a market leader in that space, and it's helped us really well.
So like with the plastic bottles,
Yep.
Obviously there was a reason that you did that.
Yep.
So further than like financial sustainability,
Yep.
how do you define success in Dynasty?
Good question. For me, it's still like at the airport. I was traveling last week, and there's 3 or 4 people without bags, from different teams on the airport. For me, that's a huge buzz, to know. I know what order that came in and where that came from, and you kind of lose sight of that when you grow. But in terms of success, just for us to keep growing, I get quite a lot of satisfaction over the fact that our partners genuinely think that we're the best they've ever worked with in this space, and that goal of being best or always innovating is something which I'm really motivated by, and something that we as a company are really big on. So I know a lot of our competitors don't do that stuff. There's a lot of suppliers that will have the same fabric for 10 years as an example. For us, we change our products yearly. We do a survey to the market, talk to the players, jersey fits and that sort of stuff, and change it according to the feedback. A lot of our competitors don't do that. They just stay with what they're doing, and that sort of is a key point of difference for us.
Do you get lots of sweet kickbacks from all of these teams, like tickets to games and
Yeah, absolutely. It's not a it's a big part, and we've been involved in some pretty cool moments. One of the coolest for me was we do Tonga Rugby League, and they I don't know how many of you guys follow league, but they beat the Kangaroos at Eden Park in 2019, and we're in the changing sheds with the boys afterwards, and on the bus back with the players and back at the team hotel having a few beers and stuff like that. I guess growing up loving sport, I'd love to have had those moments being a player, but I was never good enough to do that. So it's sort of somewhat the next best thing. But that's not why you do it. But that's one of the cool things that comes with it.
Okay, Martin, is this a good one?
I hope so.
Yeah. Okay, good.
Before going into the sort of plastic bottle stuff,
Yeah.
did you have to do any sort of validation or any research on whether going into that or innovating that way would get you a return?
Yeah, in terms of research, so we've done, as a business, we were using a marketing agency externally. We've brought our marketing in-house, at the start of the year, and for us that's been huge. You know, they're just having marketing in-house for me has been massive. But they're quite big on that market research factor. Like my experience, you know, I've been doing this for, you know, over 10 years now. You kind of get a pretty good gut feel for what your market is and how things work. And I back them because, you know, you've got a GM of marketing coming in, you can't really say to him, hey mate, you can't do what you want to do, because you've kind of got to let people, you know, have a crack their way. But you can often spend a lot of time and money on what people might think. So the recycled bottle stuff is probably a poor example of that, but I was just so sure in my mind, like I always look at what like the likes of Nike and Adidas are doing, and that was something that they were doing at that elite level. So for us to be able to do that at our level, that gave me the validation that was going to be the right thing. And I've probably got like a cool group of 4 or 5 people within the business that we discuss ideas or, you know, new teams that we're looking to sign or expansion or whatever, and we're all sort of on the same page of that. So yeah, I mean, we didn't do market research for that. Not to say that you shouldn't do any market research, but like from my example with the marketing team, the research that they did just validated everything which I knew, and it cost us like, I think it was 25 grand in research. So, you know, it was a considerable amount of money for what I probably could have told them anyway. But,
Oh. Okay, last 2, and if there's any burning ones, Tyler might be able to stay for a couple minutes. I'm sure he can see back to it, or I'm sure we can flip them through. So yeah, Toby and Sam, and then any more we'll go later. You're coming in hot today.
Yes.
What's your favourite sport, both like personally and in production?
personally and playing, or?
Yeah, whatever.
Oh, mate, so it's interesting. Like I think I grew up playing rugby. Played obviously here, and so like that was something which I was really passionate about. But like for me, the NRL is just, I think it's fantastic. In terms of a local sport, you know, I've got something on the weekend with Peter Valandis, who's the chairman, who if any of you follow rugby league, you know him, but they're really motivated by viewership and fan engagement. And that's probably the opposite of rugby union, where you know they're got some old rules that they don't want to change, and they don't really care what the viewers think. So that means that viewership's going to decrease. Whereas the NRL, you know, every rule change that they make is all about the fan and engagement. And I think that's really cool. And you know, he's someone that I'm really excited to meet and hear speak. But you know, further abroad, the NBA, probably like all you guys, you know, that's you know a huge sport. Basketball's a sport which we're doing a bit of, and every year with the schools that we do, I always get a call from one of our reps around March or April. Hey, like this school, they need 100 basketball students because there's just so many kids playing it. So I think basketball's a cool sport. One which I still play with a few of the boys socially, which is good fun. But yeah.
And Toby, last.
With your business being mostly B2B, what are your like sales channels, and how do you, is it mostly just from contacts, or is it from like Googling you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, ours is mostly B2B on the team sport side. We end up going B2C with our team products. So for that, marketing wise, like we're using social media, Google Ads, all the usual stuff which most businesses would use. But in terms of B2B, yeah, it's really just using your network. And what I touched on before about your network at school, a great example the other day was I'm trying to get some stuff into the warehouse. One of the guys that was in my year at school, he's the buyer in the category which I need. Like being able to flick him a message on Facebook, like, hey mate, how are you? Like, long time no chat, like, you free to catch up with a coffee? Like, you know, if you send that to someone on LinkedIn as an example that you've never met before, like, they might come back to you, but chances are they're probably not. Whereas just having that relationship of being able to go like, hey mate, can you catch up? And we did, and now it's in motion, which is great. But yeah, I think it's just using that network of people. You guys are so fortunate in this, and when you go to uni as well, you'll meet another network of people, which again you'll use, and certainly often in what we do or a business, the guys which are great networkers often are able to grow faster. But then also looking at our staff, so when we employ a sales rep as an example, you look at like the characteristics for them are generally that they're good with people, but also you look at what their network is in that specific market. So, you know, there's no point in having someone that's, well, there may be if they're a great salesman, but, you know, like let's say we're moving into Melbourne and employing someone from Dunedin that's moving to Melbourne in that market. You know, they're not going to have contacts there, whereas if you've got someone which is established there that works in sport or works in the area that we need to, it's going to be far easier for them to open doors. So yeah, it's just networking, but don't be afraid to cold call people, and you know, I guess have your sales pitch and why you want to call them really sought after. You know, like I'll give up time for people that call or want to pitch something. You'll always hear them, but you know, the very good ones, you'll take it on board and deliver it forward. So, you know, if you get that opportunity, probably just really have your story or what you want to achieve out of it prepared. Because, you know, people will take a meeting off a cold call.
And actually Friday afternoon we've got BNI networking coming in to do a session on
Awesome.
networking.
Yeah.
So that's really exciting. Look, awesome, Tyler. That's incredibly interesting. And I think the beauty of the session was incredibly down to earth, because obviously Tyler's business is at one end of the business life cycle, you know, partway through that, and you're very much at the beginning, but I think you can still take a lot of what he has said about logistics and supply chain and obviously business growth, even at this early stage. And hopefully also as you grow, you might remember some of the things and, you know, not do some of the things that you might have done if you hadn't had that experience. And it could be worth some of you, you know, looking into that 3PL. Somebody did mention that earlier in the year. I was trying to wrap my brains as to who it was. Sorry?
It was the guy that sold businesses.
Yes.
Lester and Richard, when they came in and did that session. Is that what it was? Okay, I knew we'd discuss it. I knew some of you were interested at that point.
Another thing, which I'm not sure if you guys, I don't know where you're at with your businesses or whatever you're trying to do, but drop shipping is another one which you can look at. You know, a lot of suppliers will drop ship. I mean, it's often like really slow and clunky and not great, but if you want to start out, like it's an easy way that you can generate some revenue, and there's lots of people doing it, so it is possible.
Wonderful. I really appreciate it, but Alex is going to do the final.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, so just on behalf of everyone here at Openground, I'd like to say thank you for spending time out of your days to come talk to us. So yeah, a small token of our appreciation.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks, guys.